Yeah, though interestingly, in the UK, it's hard to talk about purity of line because most of the time you're just fiddling in gear on some random face, and it's like hard to really know where the lines are because there aren't obvious cracks. You're just like questing up a wall. This is Climbing Gold. Can you try to give us an overview of what trad climbing in the UK is like?
Yeah, so I mean, I do love trad climbing in the UK, and you've sadly sampled some of it. Like you said, like you mentioned, I saw you write up on grit that it's more like gymnastics than you know what I mean, because it's so small, isn't it? But and everything happens quite fast on grit. But so the crags we have in the UK are pretty damn small, but there's a huge variety. You've got lots of different rock types, and it's all about there's just some good cracks and corners, obviously not on the same scale as what you get in America. But they're quite intricate climbs. In America, I think Pete Livesey, who's a famous climber from the 1970s, really pushed boundaries or helped push boundaries in the UK. He said in America, in the States, you kind of you know what's coming, and that's kind of scary in itself. It's just you're going to have an endless crack, which is going to be physical. Whereas in the UK, on the harder climbs, quite often you don't know what's coming. Do you know what I mean? It's quite hard technical route finding on them. The gear might not be too obvious, and that it's that kind of element of doubt because you don't know what's coming. Whereas America, you just know you're going to have some brutal, and a lot of the climbs, certainly the ones that have done, the horrendous cracks that just go on forever. So that's how we framed it. So yeah, but it's a lot of, I guess in America it seemed quite trusting of cams, whereas in the UK it's a lot more wire, a lot more placing wires, micro wires, quite slim, shallow cracks.
I mean, so what does it mean to try to onside a route like that?
In my teenage years, so I was making progressive, quite rapid improvements. Your body's, I had a good head at the time. I was mainly soloing, so that serious routes, like like dangerous ones, so things like Bells the Bells, a couple of other E7s I'd onside, it felt all right, and I'd just been traversing in this, the old school brickhead shit climbing walls. I'd been doing this like laps on this, probably around 7C8 and started to onsight these sevens. I thought, all right, Masters Wall's an obvious one to have in my sights because I'm, going well on technical terrain. And they meant everything to me. But you feel that climbing's definitely worth your life just to push the boat out as far as you can. And especially when I was younger, I was after, finding that point where you see what you can do when you're in desperation, kind of pulling something out of the bag, so to speak. But yeah, I got on Masters and it was quite green, it wasn't in great condition. But yeah, and it mentions in the guidebook, in the old description, that it's got a file down rock 6, so wire about a quarter of the way up, maybe a third of the way, about 10 or 15 meters up. So I went up to that point, tried to find it, couldn't find it. And then I committed to the main cruxes on Master's Wall. And there was probably 2 or 3 sequences that I nearly fell off, put a skyhook on, and then carried on. And I got to these edges. Now, these edges, these crimpers, but your feet aren't very good. And this is where Jerry Moffat, on his write-up that he's given, I think, an Extreme Rock or somewhere, he thinks about lowering off a skyhook on them. And I stood up on these edges and thinking, right, it started to slab off a bit. I thought, right, I'm surely in now because it's been really hard, felt a lot harder than the bells to get here. And I stood there for a minute or two working it out. It probably took me over an hour and a half to get there. And I probably spent another hour in that position. And there was a hold, a move above me, but there weren't any proper handholds, not like there's a kind of a crystal thing for my left hand, a small side pull low down for my right hand. So I was going, up and down those things. I can't traverse straight right. The foothold, the rest foothold that's quite famous on, 2/3, 3/4 height on Indian face, that was just a bit too far up to my left to reach. I would have had to do two moves I couldn't do to get to it. And eventually I got that. I thought, I'm fucking stumped. I'm going to have to drop the ropes. So I dropped the ropes to Adam, Adam Wild, who didn't know the crag, my friend, and said, right, you're going to have to go around and hoon me a rope. and he didn't know the crag, and it is quite complex. I know the crag quite well now, but it took him a long time, and I'd slung all my rack off to save weight. And I was there in the position, and having known this position now, I've been back on McGregor. It's not a piss position. It's like, it's not hard, but once you spend a bit of time on it, you're on a bit of a move. You know what I mean? And so I was changing my outside right edge, and then I was going up with lower foot again and again, and changing the front edge, and then eventually, and I had a good head at the time, but eventually I did start to lose my cool, and I started to shout for Adam. I said, Adam, where are you, Adam? And the sun had come on me, it was getting baked. I've been on it for like 3 or 4 hours by now, and eventually a rope appears. And that for about half an hour, I felt I can't hang on any longer. I can't hang on any longer. Just fingers bleed. Most tips bleeding, and just when you're absolutely gassed on a fingerboard, like super gassed. And it was like that. And I thought, fuck, I am gonna die. I'm probably gonna die on this bit of rock. It seemed ludicrous. My mum. I just thought about my bloody mum. Poor old mum. You know, um, I lost a son age 18, 19 on this fucking cliff. And yeah, but he gets the ropes and they're draped out to my right and I can see him. And I thought, fuck, I am going to die seeing this rope because he's had to tie 250 meters together, a single. And he pulls them back up and eventually, and then hoons them crosses. And eventually, Kebson, I just grabbed the bloody ropes. I think I managed to tie some slippery hitch or something shit and just fall about 50, 60 foot in at the base of Ember, the next route right, this E1. And I just go down to the lake and I'm in bits. And Adam Wilde comes down, he's crying. And we leave the ropes there. Fuck, we go down. And I couldn't feel my feet for 2 weeks. And I think it was really close to stopping climbing. It was like, just like absolutely epic. And we left all the gear then. And Seb Grieve, he's like famous. You might have seen Hard Grit. He's the dude who does that path in it, then takes some mega lobs. And but yeah, he went to have a look at Indian Face and he retrieved my gear and just sent me a note. He posted me the gear and said none of it would have held. And I knew none of it would have held. And it was miles above it as well. So that was the first time on Masters Wall.